Hey, we're back and going to talk more about climate change. And today we're talking about the consequences of a warmer planet. The first consequence we're going to talk about is just a change to our weather. And one of the big results of this changing weather is actually going to be seen in crop production. I'm talking about our food. The overall consensus with our planet warming is that soil moisture is going to decrease. Yes, there's going to be more precipitation, but the higher temperatures mean that the soil will have less water in it, meaning that food's not going to grow as well. If we can't grow food, there's going to be some real serious issues. Another change to our weather is going to be the increase of severe weather. Things like flooding and thunderstorms, and definitely more frequent and more intense hurricanes. Because hurricanes get all of their energy from warm evaporating ocean water, if the planet is warmer, the ocean will be warmer, and that means the hurricane season is going to last a lot longer, and the hurricanes that occur are more likely going to be stronger than the average hurricane of the past. Another consequence of global warming is going to be an impact on our ecosystem. We're already seeing a large increase in forest fires, and that's only going to continue into the future. Along with forest fires, the increasing temperature and the decreasing soil moisture is just simply going to kill a lot of plant life. With rising temperatures, there's also going to be a rise in different pathogens that may affect plants or animals. Pathogens, bacteria, disease, they all grow much better in a warmer climate. And one of the saddest consequences for me is polar bears. Say goodbye to polar bears and other animals who are going to be impacted by a warmer temperature. But polar bears, they're kind of special to me. And polar bears, they hunt on sea ice. And as the planet gets warmer, the sea ice breaks up and their hunting grounds are disappearing. And there are many, many different species of organisms across the planet that are running into the same situation in their own environment. Yet another consequence of a warmer planet means that glaciers will be melting and the sea level will rise. Even if we didn't melt the ice on Greenland and Antarctica, there would still be a rise in sea level. This is simply just because of something called thermal expansion. When water gets warmer, it kind of expands, and that would increase sea level. And because of that rise in sea level, there will be a whole lot of flooding. And there will be lots of erosion in places that aren't normally eroded by waves currently. Another consequence is going to be the acidification of the ocean. I'm talking about the seawater getting more acid-like. And there's evidence of this already. Coral reef forms through the deposition of calcium carbonate. If you remember back to minerals, calcium carbonate is the chemical formula for calcite, the mineral that fizzes with hydrochloric acid. Our oceans are decreasing their pH, therefore becoming more like acid. And calcium carbonate, calcite, has a hard time precipitating in environments that have more acid. So as the ocean starts to pull more and more CO2 out of our atmosphere, the oceans will continue to become more and more acidic. And a lot of organisms in the ocean, they thrive and grow in a very specific pH level. And one of our last consequences we're going to cover is just simply the economic cost of a warmer planet. The cost of rebuilding coastal areas when they flood, the cost of building levees to protect low-lying areas, the cost of making canals to save us from the floodwaters. It all adds up. And if you've been listening to these consequences, if they sound the same to you as they do to me, like that's living in a world with a whole lot of trouble. And besides the consequences that we mentioned that we know will happen, there are still a few consequences that we may be a little more unsure of. And that's because of mechanisms called feedback mechanisms. A feedback mechanism is just simply when an action creates an unrelated consequence that then further pushes the action forward. I know that's confusing, just follow along and you'll get it. An example of a positive feedback mechanism would be ice melting and something we call albedo. Albedo is pretty much the reflectiveness of Earth's surface. And ice does a really good job at reflecting sunlight back into space. And the more sunlight that's reflected, the cooler the planet would get. The cooler the planet gets, the more ice that forms. The more ice that forms, the more light is reflected, and we have this big positive feedback mechanism, a big loop, eventually making the planet cooler and cooler and cooler. But that's not what's happening now. We have the opposite. Our planet is warming up, melting the ice, decreasing how much light is reflected. That means our planet is continuing to get warmer, continuing to melt our ice. And this positive feedback mechanism is working in a way that's going to cause our planet to warm up a lot. Another example is photosynthesis, CO2, and decomposition. Photosynthesis that occurs in plants reduces CO2 in the atmosphere, but we talked about earlier how soil moisture is going to be a lot less with a warmer planet. This means the plants that are removing CO2 from our atmosphere are actually going to end up dying. When they die and fall over and start to decay, that decay releases CO2 into the atmosphere. And eventually this whole combination of photosynthesis and decomposition and soil moisture eventually is going to add up to a net gain of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. The last feedback loop we're going to talk about is actually the most terrifying to me, and it's permafrost that contains methane. Methane is a gas that's 20 times stronger of a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So when we start releasing this methane into the atmosphere, we're really going to do some damage. A lot of this methane is trapped in what we call permafrost. And permafrost is soil that is constantly frozen year-round, summer and winter, places like northern Canada, think of like Siberia. And because our planet is getting warmer because of human-produced CO2, we're melting permafrost, releasing this very strong greenhouse gas into our atmosphere. That methane gas then causes the planet to warm further, melting more permafrost, releasing more methane, and so on and so on and so on. And as we're releasing this extremely strong greenhouse gas, it might cause a runaway effect of global warming. And the little push that it started with was human-produced CO2. A little bit of warming caused by us might have already started this domino effect of permafrost releasing methane. So, what can we do? Collectively, there's 161 countries that have all come together to try figuring out a solution to what's probably going to end up being one of our biggest problems. And this group of countries meets every 5 years to compare data and to really just try to come up with solutions to global warming. And all solutions are really going to include two parts. We need to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that are emitted. That's a no-brainer. But paired with that, we're not really going to see a big change to our climate unless we can also implement carbon capture. We need to come up with widespread, easily accessible ways to remove the carbon dioxide from our atmosphere. Doing one without the other is not going to give us a solution. And really the bottom line I want you to hear is that one person does matter. The decisions you and your family make does have an impact. All of these small changes that we can all make together with the whole planet is really going to have a good outcome. And this problem is not going to be my problem. It's going to end up being your problem in the future. For you and your kids, I hope this is something we can figure out. If you have any questions, let's talk about it. Otherwise, make sure you're taking some good notes, and I'll see you later.